Live. Welcome to Unblocked Live. My guest today is coming to us from the great state of Vermont. A friend of mine who I haven't talked in a while, so we're going to get to catch up on this edition of Unblocked Live. My guest is Myra Flynn. Myra, welcome to the show. This is Unblocked Live, the anti-polarization podcast, we call it. It's a chance to talk about issues from politics to social issues to the arts. We talk about it all. And Myra is my guest. I know her from Los Angeles. She is back in Vermont, the state, her home state. Welcome to the show, Myra Flynn.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's so great to be here.
Hey, and how is it being in Vermont now after spending the greater part of this last year, the year that will go down, I guess, in history for all of us, 2020, all it was in terms of COVID and being in Los Angeles during the civil unrest, especially at the end of May and into June, and now you're in Vermont. Tell us a little bit about the decision to go back to Vermont and what you're thinking and feeling at this time, and a happy belated Mother's Day, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Myra is a singer and songwriter, and her new single also came out, which was aptly themed for Mother's Day. Is this your first or second Mother's Day?
I mean, let's just go ahead and call it a first, since the first one, like had just given birth, and not super memorable from my Mother's Day perspective, to say the least. Got a lot going on in those first few months, but no, it's my second Mother's Day. But I took advantage and had a whole Mother's Day weekend celebration. So we had a party.
Fantastic. And your new single also came out. You are a singer-songwriter who I have had the pleasure of seeing perform live in Los Angeles several times. And your new single is called?
My new single is called Mama Song. Yeah. Mama, and you might hear a little baby in the background right now. Yeah, my new single is called Mama Song. And let's see. To go back to your question about what it's like to be back in Vermont, I grew up here and left here very intentionally. Got my first record deal at age 16, went to college outside of Philadelphia, lived in New York City for 6 years, and have been in Los Angeles the last 8 years. I can't even believe it. Never expected to find the kind of domestic situation I now have going on in Los Angeles. But, I went from rock star to wife to mother to trying to figure out how to encompass all of those things all at once. And a lot changed, right? It's not just me anymore. And so this last year during COVID, we did our best in LA. And I think it got to a place where it was really not really fair to the baby and her development at a certain point once the fires came. So first there was COVID, everything was incredibly shut down. We had a nice house in Pasadena, a little bit outside of the craziness, outside of, downtown LA. So we had a little bit of a buffer between us and too many people. So that felt doable. You want me to stay inside? I can stay inside. I'm a new mom. But then, the civil unrest happened, and there were protests. There were like car protests that were happening right outside of our door. So it went from stay inside because of COVID to, Phil, I don't want you to go to the grocery store. My husband is Black, so I don't want you to go to the grocery store because I'm worried. I don't want you going anywhere. This is not a time for Black people to be outside. And so we're still in LA and we're still inside for these reasons. And then the Bobcat fires happened about 5 miles from our house, and the whole downstairs of our house filled with smoke. And so we were then sequestered with me, my husband, my baby, and our geriatric 20-year-old Chihuahua to one room with an air filter. And that did it.
You were ready for more space after that.
I was ready for more space. Like, to put it like very like simply, like I wanted my mama. Like my family is still here in Vermont. Phil's family is here in Vermont. Nobody knew the baby because of COVID. And I was frustrated with Vermont because Vermont always came across as a little smug to me in COVID, my friends would call and be like, we're doing the best in the state. We have the best numbers. And I'm like, yeah, you're kind of like set up to, for like individualistic success regarding COVID. It's, very highly privileged state, majority white. Everybody is, kind of spaced out inherently just by the nature of, it's a low population. And so thinking back to LA and thinking about, the Latinx community and how many of these essential workers or workers that we would never deem as essential but won't allow them to stop working either are sometimes sleeping 12 to a household, and passing COVID back and forth, and just how that is such a reality for so much of this country that bubbles like Vermont and New England are just not even privy to. And so every time those phone calls would happen, I'd be like, yeah, well, COVID's actually pretty racist and probably not something that will, come across your day to day, but it's something that I'm seeing very blatantly here. So I'm back in Vermont, but on a mission to keep my worldliness at top of mind.
I see. And tell me a little bit about your current position. You're working now for Vermont Public Radio, and what is the vision that you have and would like to bring as far as from your travels, your artistic experience, returning home? I always think a homecoming is a wonderful creative experience and a way to sort of put your life into relief. And what goals and visions do you have for the future in radio?
Yeah, well, VPR, Vermont Public Radio, is the Vermont subsidiary of NPR. So I think any NPR listeners out there have a good idea of kind of our vibe, if you will, and politically or otherwise. And I feel really lucky because I'm actually an engagement producer and an engagement journalist for a show called Brave Little State, which was founded by Angela Evansy, who is now my team leader. And she's just a boss. She started it top to bottom. And it's a podcast as well as also on broadcast. So I came on board thinking, wow, like I'm going to be helping with a piece of this podcast. And she's actually just wanted more Angelas. Like I'm actually doing a full lift myself. So I've learned so much about how to create a full podcast top to bottom, score the music, mix the audio, interview the folks, write the script, everything, just absolutely everything, do the web builds. So I'm still in learning mode. I've been here like a month and a half, but it's already been so wonderful. I pitched a series and VPR said yes. I apologize. My Outlook is very noisy. And VPR said yes to it. So my vision is to really, make VPR sound more familiarized to different cultures. So right now I've pitched a series called Homegoings, which is so interesting that you just said homecomings, because homegoings or elaborate homegoings are actually what in Black culture surrounds like a funeral, or what is called a funeral. And it's like this beautiful, elaborate celebration of sending the spirit back home. So coming up on May 25th, which will be the anniversary of George Floyd's murder, my series will launch, and I'm actually interviewing musicians. So I'm merging worlds. Think of like your nerdiest singer-songwriter that has the dopest lyrics. That's who I'm interviewing. And I'm saying, how do you reconcile where we're at 1 year later with the art that you're creating? And so it's really great. Like, I feel like I was hired to be exactly who I am and bring on the skills that I have and the values that I hold. And that feels like a really good fit.
And what do you think artists have to offer, and what have you, how have you struggled personally to sort of process this year? I mean, you're one of the few people that I know who is an artist and a journalist as well, and you have both those backgrounds, and you don't see that very often, where people are willing to plug in artistically and also work as journalists. And what sort of special, I guess, ability or insight do you think that that gives when you're both an artist and a journalist?
Well, I think that artists are journalists, and I think often that correlation is really missed. Like both songwriters or painters or actors and journalists are all stenographers, we're all here to take massive subjects and massive amounts of emotion and whittle it down into stanzas or one painting or one performance or one piece. And a journalist has that same duty when reporting on something that is such a large issue, to condense it down into the most palatable, listenable, and informative piece as possible. I think there's like it's kind of a misconception that artists are just like running around writing about how we feel. Like, I have felt a lot of pressure as an artist during these times to make sure, as Nina Simone said, that I am fulfilling my responsibility of reflecting them. But I also think specifically like with this Mama song that's coming up right now, I've been a little exhausted of feeling like I need to make my art always be this like sense or this performative piece of like activism. And as if that's become like the expectation, especially with the spotlight so highly on Black centric art or Black musicians or Black people right now. I'm not a scholar in Blackness. I'm just Black. And so feeling like I always have to create pieces that are helping others learn kind of robbed the joy out of my art. So the Mama song was about something that brings me joy, thinking about, while I was so far away from my mother, last Mother's Day, that's when I created this song. And, my new daughter brings me joy, brings me a new sense of purpose, and Black lives matter. And also Black joy matters, Black leisure matters, Black art matters. And I think it can be really radical in and of itself to just enjoy your art as well. So working back towards that goal.
Oh, fantastic. And do you have any shows planned up? Now, not everybody listening or seeing this in the future is going to be within local range to just, come see Myra Flynn live. But are you reconnecting? I know one of my favorite, even before I met you in LA, one of my favorite concerts I saw was was it a Vermont Public Radio concert? It was through NPR. It was a live show that I know you did. I remember the first song was the Color Me Crazy.
Color Me Love. Yeah, Color Me Love.
Color Me Love. I still have that song stuck in my head, but I think I remember it was a video live session on NPR. I know it was one of the first concerts I saw of yours, which I like very much. So everybody Google Myra Flynn NPR video live session, because that's if you want to hear some great music. And
Thank you.
You're a piano player too, people should know, and a songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that clip very well. Are you reconnecting, in other words, with musicians, and what's the scene like in Vermont compared to Los Angeles?
Yeah, a few venues in LA have reached out to me to come back and perform. And I think the biggest difference that I'm noting, for as much as Los Angeles loves to spend time outdoors, a lot of the music opportunities are all indoors. And I'm personally, even though I'm fully vaccinated, I'm not feeling quite ready to not only put myself at risk in those ways, but to gather a crowd of folks indoors who may not be fully vaccinated and then put them at risk. So I am slowly saying yes to concerts locally that are outdoors. If LA, what's up LA, I'm talking to you, wants to host some more outdoor festivals and concerts, I'd be so excited for that. I know that the numbers are still not, great there, even though they're getting better. And so I think everybody should consider gatherings, to be risky. But here in Vermont, the numbers are the lowest in the country for some of the reasons that I mentioned previous. And so I do feel safe having outdoor concerts, and I have 9 concerts slated. And my band, my piano player in my band, because I like to just sing in my band, he has figured out how to have outdoor rehearsals for us as well. So yeah, we're just being as safe as possible.
Any gigs on the calendar that I need to know about? Or?
Well, I mean, if you come here, they're all local to Vermont, right now because that's what feels safe. But yes, I start on the 2nd of June and I go all the way until the 27th of August.
Okay, cool. And people will be able to find that information, I'm sure, on myraflynn.com.
Correct. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I did have the pleasure of visiting Vermont once, and one of the characteristics, or I guess stereotypes of Vermont, is everything is artisanal and crafted, and you even have a notion of the creative economy and the gig economy being, a big part of Vermont life. And I'm curious, post-COVID, how Vermonters are envisioning the future and rebounding economically. And one topic I also mentioned to you that I thought was interesting is that Burlington very early on also talked about reparations and having a task force. And there are other cities across the country that have spoken about reparations. One is called Evanston, Illinois, I believe, was one of the first. And when it comes to economic justice, how is that looked at locally? What feelings do you have about the economy responding post-COVID, and what can be done more in the future to ensure more equality of opportunity and economic justice?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I spoke a little bit earlier to the privilege that has kept COVID numbers so low here in Vermont, and I do feel comfortable speaking to that same privilege when we talk about this like artisanal boutique, small business life. Like a lot of the folks who are opening those kinds of things here in Vermont could afford to previous to COVID and have been able to afford to keep it going post-COVID. But then, really it's from my mind's eye, it seems to be the agriculture here that is really suffering the most. So farmers, there's a great, outside of Burlington where you visited, there's a great many pockets of Vermont that are incredibly poor and have been suffering quite a bit. From what I understand, the PPP loans have been amazing and in keeping some of those businesses afloat. And then some of them have just really been trying to get creative. I've seen a lot of the rural schools close. I've seen a lot of the rural schools merge. I've seen a lot of businesses merging. In fact, VPR is merging with PBS. So even media is finding out other ways to merge. So I'm seeing some creativity there. Our governor, Phil Scott, is interesting because this is clearly a blue state and a predominantly liberal Democratic state with a Republican governor who acts so freaking liberal. Like he's fantastic. And he's been the first, for instance, you speak about reparations. I can say like healthcare wise, I'm seeing that showing up beautifully. I was able to get vaccinated as soon as I got off the plane from LA because I'm BIPOC, Black Indigenous person of color. And he made sure that BIPOC people in Vermont could get vaccinated ahead of time because of weathering and because of the systems of racism and injustice that have really taken a toll on Black health or, person of color health. And so that was a really beautiful thing. And now there's even more talks about let's not stop at the vaccine. Let's look at how that healthcare can be doled out better to folks in need first and foremost. And he got a lot of flack for that decision. And he responded with such grace. It was just like, clearly Vermont has quite a bit to learn about the systems of racism. So he doesn't seem to be afraid to make some really bold choices regarding, a progressive nature towards achieving that level of equality. I think Vermont historically has been great at that. It was the first state to enact civil unions. It was the first state to abolish slavery, although there's still some messy stuff left over from that, which we'd have to allocate a whole other episode to. But yeah, it was the first state to it wasn't legalizing marijuana, but the first state to do something regarding marijuana. Maybe it was growing it or something like that. So it's known for its progressiveness, this state is. If you start to peek between the layers, you can see that there's still quite a lot of work to be done here regarding that progressiveness and upholding that reputation. But I'd say I'm seeing some good things happen.
I'm interested also in Vermont. I've been traveling across the country. One place that I've been is the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Seattle, where even today there are regular protest actions which take the form of rioting. It doesn't seem that Vermont, I mean, from what I know, has been able to embrace progressivism without the same kind of militancy of activism. I'm curious what your view of that is. If there's anything uniquely about Vermont that you would say is a different temperament. I don't know if you've been up to Portland or to Seattle, but certainly we associate the Pacific Northwest with progressivism, with activism. We associate Vermont with progressivism, but in Vermont, I don't have the same evidence, and unless I'm looking in the wrong places, of that kind of militancy that you see in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm curious what impressions you might have in regards to that.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's a lot of other here. So, if it's a pretty homogenized in race, in age range, this, one of the larger concerns about Vermont is that, it's a much older age group that lives here, majority. Does not have a ton of job opportunity for young folks, young militant activist folks, and so if everybody is kind of the same, coming from the same workup or makeup in a lot of ways, then I think you're not going to have as much of a rub. So I think that's really important. Like a lot of the newer, younger folks of color, of different class backgrounds, and of different, political backgrounds, are students here, because it does have quite a few colleges, and so you will see quite a few protests and rallies happening surrounding that. But for the most part, I do think that Vermont is pretty homogenized. You don't move here easily. Vermont is freezing cold. It's up by Canada. It's snowing, 8 months out of the year. And it also just has a reputation for being tough and working towards survival. And there's always a wood stove that needs tending, and there's always a garden that needs to be put to bed, and there's always a roof that needs to be put on, or a well that needs to be dug. And folks are very, I don't want to say chained, but very attached and tethered to these responsibilities here. So I also sometimes think there just isn't a lot of opportunity for folks to feel like they're a part of the rest of what's going on in the world. Or should I say, you have the opportunity to remove yourself from what's going on in the rest of the world here, and just really sinking into your responsibilities and your corner of the state.
Well, in some ways, Los Angeles is divorced from the rest of the world in its own way. I mean, I think we could probably come up with instances in which that's the case. It must be a culture shock in the sense of going from LA to Vermont. Now tell me about when you first started in the music industry, because that's a part of, a lot has changed since then. I mean, since then we've had the Me Too movement. We've had a lot. There is a reckoning, especially in the entertainment industry, when it comes to people who have abused their power. What was it like? You said you started as a teenager in the music industry. Was that in Los Angeles, or was that on the East Coast? And that you were in first. Take us through when your entree into the music industry.
Yeah, this is a really tough subject for me to talk about, that I don't actually really talk about often. But I'll try to answer the question as comfortably as I can. I was signed to a record label that I won't name in New York City when I was 16. And it was a male-dominated label. And yes, I do see the Me Too movement showing up quite a bit in Hollywood. And not so much in the music industry. I think that reckoning has yet to come. I go back and forth every day trying to figure out how to speak about this in a way where other female musicians feel like they can come forward. But I mean, long story short, like it wasn't good. It wasn't like a good experience. It's pretty scary. And, you know, just a lot of like, if you want to get famous, this is what you have to do. And it's so nice being older now and being like, oh, there's no one person that's offering you that ticket or one way to achieve it. You have to earn it slowly. And so to any young women in the music industry out there listening, you're in a really cool time right now where you don't have to rely on a label at all if you don't want to have your music seen and heard. And that independence is going to just create, I think, some of the best music we've ever heard, because the pressure that I felt from that label at that time, and I've been signed to 3 different labels in my life now, and I'm back to independent now. But that particular label at the time really strangled my music and my art because I wasn't being treated very well.
And the independence that one has, I mean, you think of what's successful today, what is commercial, what sells. And one can hardly recognize it being music at times, because it's just this clutter of all this other stuff. And I think most people are frustrated, yet the industry itself seems to march on. And here, someone like you who's been playing piano since you were a kid, who's very accomplished in terms of songwriting, performing, has the chops, you know, and incredibly, look, I'll shower you with, you know,
I'll take it.
I'll shower you with great reviews for every show that I've seen in Hollywood, you know, of your work. You know, the charisma and the presence and all of this, it doesn't seem, for whatever reason, that the industry has been very interested in that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think mass culture gravitates towards this very simplistic, almost non-musical stuff that can be, you know, shoveled out so easily? And it seems to be, you know, it seems to be that I can't even remember, you know, unique voices, the unique artists who compose their own work and who have something to say and are these living, you know, works of art. You know, why are those undervalued, do you think, in the present age? And might there be a return to that? I certainly hope so. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a tough person to interview with this particular. Thank you for all the kind words, by the way. That feels really nice to hear. Because I'm a fan of all of it. You know, I don't think the music industry has as much of a say as folks think it does. It's a machine that works based on what is already working. So one of the biggest problems that we have is, with labels, in my opinion, is that they are now, because they don't have any money either, finding artists who already have a good thing going, already have the Instagram numbers, already have the SoundCloud plays, already have a presence, already did their music video, and they're saying, hey, we'll sign you. But what that really means is they're just going to go ahead and glob onto the things that you are already doing and expect you to continue doing them. The cool thing that comes with that, their marketing department and things like that. But I don't know that any labels are really in a position to sit back and like cook up a grand scheme as to like what people are listening to anymore, like they did back in the Motown days or the Berry Gordy days, and then, you know, advance artists with $80,000 and then sign them for pennies. And then, you know, so in some ways it's frustrating and in some ways it's better. I think what you might have to think about, and I'm just talking to you because I love how this is actually some of your opinion, you know, is that the people are kind of electing for this kind of music to be very popular. And, you know, you think about music like mine, or you think about people that have this very intentional singer-songwriter thing going on with what I would think would be like pretty, I think I have some substance in my music. And then you think about the people who listen to that. A lot of it is like still going to be that like baby boomer era who grew up listening to the Joni Mitchells, who grew up in the listening rooms with the piano players, things like that. And the younger crowd, music is synonymous with an experience, a party, a rave, a vacation, a swimming episode, a soundtrack to the background of some like giant fun part of their life. It's not necessarily a sit down and listen to the message. And I think that ultimately is kind of the frustration that you're tapping into. It's just like, why doesn't the younger generation want to sit down and tap into the message? Thankfully, with some of these young activists, because I'm really actually quite impressed with young people right now, I think you're right that we're on the track to be hearing some new and some different stuff and some radical stuff. And I would also encourage everyone who enjoys music to try to seek out the radical nature in every form of music. So sometimes it might not sound that radical to hear, the chopped and screwed mumble rap from the South, but the fact that those like young Black men in the middle of nowhere Atlanta are making this music out of like, the 4-track recorders that they could afford in like, an abandoned house a lot of the time. And that made it to the airwaves is punk rock. That is radical. That is actually phenomenal. And so we have to sometimes look at the backstory.
How did this current music landscape happen? In other words, the advent of Spotify and iTunes, did it all start when Napster came out, and then all of a sudden the internet changed how artists were able to be presented or marketed? Tell me a little bit about the current landscape and what this sort of a la carte attitude, I guess, what that means for artists, because it's rare, that people pick out a full album and put it down and really listen to an album like we used to when we were growing up.
Yeah, I mean, and here's where my opinion comes in. Like, I just think it's just straight garbage and lawlessness. Like, I don't understand how music seemed to be the only casualty of the free market. I have no clue why some government officials who, at least if you just want to talk dollars, appreciate the tourist attraction that music provides this country, are not stepping in with some laws. I have no clue how we got here, except someone figured out how to pass it along on the internet in a way that you can't really do with a painting, in the way that you can't totally do with a movie. The movies do have more rights, even though TV and photography are going through their own blights with this transition as well. For some reason, music has been turned into McDonald's. And it's so interesting because I teach music. I'll teach like songwriting workshops or courses. I just finished teaching a college course at NVU. And, I'll say like, well, where do you get your music? And, even when I'm talking about songwriting, then all it takes, because these folks would love to become songwriters. And I'll say, where do you get your music? And they're like, oh, Spotify. And I'm like, well, that's not great. Have you ever tried Pandora? And then they'll be like, but I have to pay for that. And I'm like, here you are in a course trying to learn how to take on this career and profession. And even on the back end, it's like, wait, what? I have to pay for my music? I mean, it's just become so normal now to just achieve music for free. And it's leveled everyone. It's leveled absolutely everyone. So I don't know. This is my call out to anyone who makes laws happen to take a better and closer look at this, because I think if COVID has shown us anything, it's also that a lot of this bailout money has had to go to independent artists who we recognize as economically valuable when they're up and working and are a total drain on the system, quote unquote, the second there's, something like a pandemic happens. So at the very least, you just don't want to have to pay us out again, then step in with some laws. It's just not very fair, is it? It's like to go from labels who take all of your money to trying to be independent and then having the internet take all your money. But we need the internet to be independent. It's garbage. It's awful. I know Taylor Swift yanked herself off of Spotify for a while. And frankly, I'm an artist against Spotify, and you can be too.
Sorry, can you say that one more time? What did you say about Spotify?
I'm an artist against Spotify.
An artist against Spotify. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have Spotify.
I don't have it myself. And is that because the way that Spotify operates and sort of absorbs all this content that there's very little return?
It's because I see what my paychecks look like from Spotify because I am on Spotify. It's part of my distribution deal. So I'm automatically distributed to it and I get like a fraction of a penny, um, for per song play. And they just really figured out a workaround with like, they're basically Napster. So I know they're never going to have me as artist of the year right now. But yeah, they just really figured out a workaround. Apple Music is still the best. If I'm correct, you might want to fact check this, but I think it's 80 cents to every dollar that we get paid for a download. And whenever I want to buy some music or support another artist, I always buy it on Apple Music.
Okay. And here's a viewer question. Lilith asks, would your guest agree that good artists are still breaking through and can earn money if they work outside the current system? And then she lists some others that she believes have thrived. What are your thoughts on that comment?
I have been making a living and a decent living outside of the system for a while now. But I will say this, it's backbreaking work. It involves a lot of live shows, and touring. And there's something really cool about that for the first 5 years. And I'd say after 10 years, if you have any hopes of starting a family or being a human, or taking care of your body, or like, I'm finally just now getting to like go and see what damaged microphones have done to my teeth. And like, if you legitimately want quality of life, at a certain point, you would like to think that your recordings can have life outside of your body needing to physically show up to things. And I think that's what's frustrating. But yes, it's possible. It's totally possible.
Well, I certainly hope people will go and check out your stuff, MyraFlynn.com. And also, I know I've seen several of your videos on YouTube as well. And so those watching on YouTube, it's as easy as a search bar, plugging in Myra Flynn. And last, I know you have to go because you have I'm sure, a full day ahead. And congratulations again on the new position with Vermont Public Radio and your young family in Vermont. And what can you leave us with as far as what to look forward to, and where else can people find you?
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. It's so nice being on here. I think what we have to look forward to is a big boom of like makeup from all of the love and the hugs and the music and the restaurants and the oysters for me, that are to come. I think there's going to be a big boom of this coming back up. So hopefully everybody is ready for it, ready to navigate it safely. I'm a big believer in this vaccine, and you don't have to be, but if you are, I hope that you're feeling ready for this boom and ready to support your local artists or restaurants or all of those people who have been really down for a while now. And as far as where you can find me, I do most of my dirty work on Instagram. So there's just too many platforms. So I just stick to one. So I'm on Instagram. You can just find me at Myra Flynn.
Myra Flynn on Instagram and in real life, also appearing in Vermont. Thanks for being our guest on Unblocked Live. Everybody, you can follow us on /Unblocked Live, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter /Unblocked Live. My guest today has been Myra Flynn. Thanks for joining us, Myra.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. Thank you, everyone.